Lightning version of a longer talk, of a longer blog, of a longer thesis. Strap in, I've only got 10 minutes for about 90 slides. So, elephant in the room, policy is not sexy, but I'm going to try and at least get your attention. So, to set the scene, yes. I'm in a lift, yes, American friends, we really do call them yes. 4 people walk in. Chris, this is your chance, a captive audience. I hear the door seal shut behind me, and I take a breath. I look to the first person, the CIO, the policymaker, the one whose neck is on the block. What are the chances of finding you in my imaginary lift today? I ask her, what keeps you up at night? We don't know what teams are really doing. Setting and changing policy is slow, hard to communicate. People just go off and do their own thing. They think they know better, but I'm left playing catch up with the risk that they've signed me up to. Second person, product manager, the whip cracker. What's important to you? Managing risk, mostly opportunity risk. It's the fear of missing out, getting features out the door, avoiding getting bogged down with bureaucracy that seems designed to slow me down. Next person, dressed in overalls, they could be the CTO. Before I ask, cleaner, they say. Okay, how did you get in my imagination? I'll come back to you. My attention goes to the last person. Hoodie, headphones around the neck. My stereotypical developer. Yes, I know you will. What's important to you? Well, writing consistent quality code, avoiding technical debt, the rest of my team being able to cohesively work as one. We use linters, code quality tools, test coverage, the usual to help with that. Great, I say. I write code too. Let's be friends, and I hand them a printed QR code with my public GPG key, so they know they can trust what I say. Back to the cleaner. How do you get told what to do and when it changes? Well, something gets stuck to the notice board. Last week we were told that the meeting room whiteboard needed to be cleaned every night. It's up to us then to keep everything in sequence. Like when we hadn't updated the meeting room and the third floor was being used as a dedicated war room and we wiped all their boards down. I look to the dev. Sound familiar? They nod. Okay, so if any of that sounds familiar and you can relate to my imaginary friends, then I've got the answers for you. What if I said that you could update policy easily, even releasing several version updates in a single day, seamlessly communicated without derailing anyone? Visibility on compliance using tools that you already use, and multiple concurrent versions of policy all being supported together. Well, I'm Chris Nesbitt-Smith. I'm an instructor for LearnK8 and also for Control Plane, a consultant to UK government, and a tinkerer of open source. I spent a fair chunk of my professional career now working in government and large organisations where problems like this are rife. This is a lightning speech, so you'll have to come find me after if you've got questions. So, by show of hands, who's with my CIO and has set, written, or applied some policy before? Okay, great. Next round. Who sought exemption or consciously bent, broken, circumvented, ignored, bypassed whatever a policy with at least good intentions? You fell for it. So we've got your names and employers' details down. So put your phones down, lend me your ears. The stakes have just got raised. So policy usually comes in one of two forms: security, like data at rest being encrypted, or consistency, such as code style. Both are intended to mitigate a risk of some sort. However, the best of intentions, these are often emotionally led rather than being grounded in a proportionate control, which is the open door to case-by-case exemptions being required when you come against a situation that you weren't anticipating. There's plenty of policy as code products out there to help, but the devil's in the detail though. Throwing some curly braces or YAML at something doesn't inherently fix things, especially if it leaves your engineers, who are all hopefully plenty smart, at finding inventive, or shall we say, ways around the computer says no response that they got. Sure, you might say that you provide warnings on less important issues on a new emerging policy, but only if someone sees them. Yep, as you know, all presentations this year are contractually required to reference Log4j, even if it's entirely out of context, and include some memes. In just a few short months, I can include these. Now, I've covered a lot of ground and hopefully sounded vaguely convincing and not just a fictional utopia that's painted in PowerPoint. I know you really came here wanting to see a million words on a slide and not just the odd emoji or two. I'm going to talk about two things to prove that it's not just one tech or one tool. I've picked Terraform and Kubernetes, but I could have picked anything. Likewise, two tools, but again, I could use any, some, or even all. In this case, Chekhov will be doing my Terraform, and Caverno will be doing my Kube. I've created an example GitHub organization here. I'm not expecting you to read or grok the code that's on the screen right now. It's just to prove that it's a real thing. So the policy is stored here. So here's where my policy starts, at version 1.0. I've got policy that requires a department label to be set on all resources. As long as it's set, it doesn't matter what it is. I've written tests for this. Passing test cases become great examples of what good and bad looks like. I've pushed a tag in Git, we've added some release notes, and I've signed it. Version 2.0 looks similar now that we have a field that has to be predetermined list, like before, test, release notes, tags, signed. 2.1.0 is where we correct a spelling mistake in that list of departments, add a new department to the list, and couple more repos in the org. So app1 and infra1, well, they depend on version 1.0, not compliant with version 2 or beyond. But how do we know this? Well, Renovate is automatically making pull requests for me, so with new versions of the policy, so I can update my dependency and get feedback on when and why I am not compliant. I can also see the pull requests over the organisation, so I can measure the compliance of my policy. Couple more repos, app2 and infra2, well, they depend on version 2 of the policy. However, we could merge the open pull request all the way up to 2.1.1. app3 and infra3, well, they're dependent on 2.1.1. I've written some bash, sorry. Now, from my laptop or in CI, I can evaluate my code against the right policy version. And the last piece of the puzzle is managing the lifecycle of the policies and allowing multiple versions of the policy to be accepted and evaluated within a single runtime. I've cheated a bit here. Kubernetes gives you admission controllers. I haven't found a sane way to be able to evaluate against Azure, GCP or AWS policy without doing it kind of for real in their world. The way the policy is designed and distributed lends itself well to coexist with previous and future versions of itself in a Kubernetes cluster though. So cluster 1 describes a cluster that accepts all of the versions we've described so far. Likewise, cluster 2 only accepts 2.0.0 or greater. To demo, I've used Kind to deploy these applications. And there we have it, a full org, all done, all compliant, policy all versioned, and CIO all aware of what's going on. So this is great. But I've still got 3 minutes. So, when some new privacy regulation comes out or you require more data, the risks and the appetite stand still for no one, and neither does our policy. But the most important thing I want you to remember from our time together is, and feel free to say this out loud with me, purposeless policy is potentially practically pointless policy, which I've been practicing saying far too many times. I've been Chris Nesbitt-Smith. Thank you for your time. You're now free to leave. I'll destroy the evidence of your guilt admissions earlier. Like, subscribe, whatever the kids do on LinkedIn, GitHub, whatever. CNS.me just points at my LinkedIn. Talks.cns.me contains this and other talks, and they're all open source.